The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to Afterlife radio podcast and video vlog. My name is Kalila Smith, coming to you live from New Orleans with my co-host Billy Roberts, coming to you live from Cornwall in the UK. We have a very special guest with us today. We have Deanna DuPont, who is also coming to you live from New Orleans. And Deanna has had some very amazing experiences in our cemeteries. Deanna actually works with me at Haunted History Tours. She's a fellow tour guide, and she has had some really odd things happen to her in some of these locations. Welcome, Deanna.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Deanna.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us this morning. So we are looking at a few different things today. Billy and I had talked in a previous show about some of the stuff that had happened to you when you were in Tennessee at the Bell Witch phenomena. And I told him about the photographs. In fact, I sent him the photographs. And Billy, you had said something about it. Is it possible? Because a photographer, tell him what the photographer told you of the pictures where someone's there and they're not. Because this led to the whole cemetery thing, because it was similar to what happened on photographs in the cemetery. You have a photograph of people, and then one right directly after it, and you see someone walking off. As if they left, and indeed they didn't, and it's very strange. We can't explain this. So Tell him what the photographer said.
Oh, okay. So the photographer, it wasn't a photographer, it was when I went, this is back when you had to have film developed. And when I went to have film developed, the lady there said, these photos are messed up. And I looked at them and I said, not just messed up. She was talking about light and things like that, and did it happen in development of the film? And of course we knew it didn't, but I was very concerned about this one particular picture where this girl was with us in the picture. And we had even laughed about the picture because one of my friends is yawning in the picture. So we knew we couldn't post it on social media or whatever because it was embarrassing. But the girl that was standing next to her that was boring her, the reason she yawned, was way off in the background walking away. So after I got the pictures back, I started questioning to different people. And I went to a person who does paranormal investigations. And they said, if you talk psychology in this, a lot of times where the person's thought process is can actually manifest them to a different point. This particular girl did not want to be with us in this cave, did not want to be on this location. She's afraid of anything that has anything to do with paranormal activity. And she kept wanting to leave. Then we get this picture developed and she's in the background leaving. This is a minor. This is not somebody, and I don't mean cave minor, I mean like young person. And she's not somebody that I would have let walk off on her own. And she's literally, probably 10, 20 feet away in the picture with her back turned. And so I didn't look into whether or not that was true, whether thoughts could manifest someone to a different location. But knowing I worked as a psychologist for years, and psychologically speaking, I know that you can distance yourself with your thoughts. I don't know manifesting it like that from a paranormal perspective. I didn't know whether it was true or not, but she's definitely not with us in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with Michael. In the photograph of those, the three that were photographed outside the cemetery, many years later, not related to the case that she was dealing with at the time she dealt with it, same scenario, and we see the gentleman in the picture walking away, and they claim he didn't walk away. They actually sent me the picture because they thought it was so strange that he was literally had his back turned walking down the sidewalk. So we just wanted to present this to you because you're our expert, Billy. You have seen everything. You've seen it all. You've heard it all. You've experienced it all. What your professional opinion of this? Because I know you talk a lot about thought forms and so forth.
By location.
Correct.
There's something called transmutation of consciousness, where, as Deanna said, you don't want to be in a certain place. You want to be somewhere else, and you can actually transport your consciousness in as much as the people can see you, even though you haven't moved from where you are. But with these photographs, I think I have to be a bit skeptical. Double exposure, light, reflection, all these different things have to be considered. I'd have to dismiss them as being what you think they are, even though you might hate me for it.
No.
But sometimes you've got to be, anecdotal evidence is not worth very much unless if you can be in there and experience it yourself, which I've got to see it to believe it. So I don't know what else to say regarding, but it is possible. I related the story about the man in South Wales in Great Britain whose wife was having an affair, and somebody told him about it, and the person told him that his wife met this young man in a barn on a farm every Sunday when he was in chapel. So what he did, he decided not to go to, although he was a regular attendee to this chapel, he had his own pew, and people knew him as a religious, very down-to-earth man. They knew that he was a respectable individual, but he decided not to go to chapel this Sunday. Instead, he went to catch his wife in the barn, and he killed both of them. He took a shotgun and killed them. Well, he was arrested because he confessed to the murder, but everybody in the chapel said he couldn't have done it because he was sitting in the pew at the beginning, in the front of the church. So the judge had no alternative but to, dismiss the case, and he got off with it. In saying that, he did commit suicide sometime later because he wasn't the same man. So you can transport your consciousness. Healers do it when they're sending healing to somebody on the other side of the world. It's possible to transport yourself. I mentioned about Padre Pio, who was a very diminutive monk. And even when he was alive, he was said to be seen in certain places, people who prayed to him. He could appear to them because he could bilocate. And that's basically it. So it is possible.
Okay, and she was in a cave. So do you think that maybe the vibrations that were in the impressions that are in that cave could have had some influence on that?
The geological phenomenon called triboluminescence is also responsible for interrupting the electromagnetic atmosphere. So being in a confined space is also possible because there is some kind of activity in the below ground that can cause all kinds of phenomena. So again, it is possible. It depends on the people who were there. Do they have vivid imaginations? Are they people for telling stories? You have to, it's human nature to embellish stories. We know that, don't we? I mean, everybody does it at some point in their life. It's like Chinese whispers. You tell something to somebody, and by the time it goes round to somebody else, it becomes something else altogether. Strange.
I know the girl that's in the picture that's walking away, I don't think she would have the capabilities of doing on purpose, manifesting herself somewhere else or divided consciousness. She's not that person that would do it on purpose. But I do know that she was in the picture when I'm the one that took the picture. So I know she was in the picture when I took it and not walking.
You were there when, sorry. Yeah.
Right. So when she's walking away, I know that there was never a time that she walked away on her own. Whether it's a double exposure or not, of course, I'm not a photographer. I just simply took the picture. But, and it's very possible that it could be something like that. She has had other strange things happen. She won't come to New Orleans at all anymore to visit because she's terrified of the city and everything that's happened to her here and all that. So I don't know if maybe she picks up things from outside sources and doesn't know what to do with maybe a possible gift that she has. I don't know, but she was definitely in that picture when I took it.
And she doesn't suffer with epilepsy?
No.
Because people with certain kinds of epilepsy, during a seizure where they don't lose consciousness, they can experience like the blinding light. Their consciousness can be transported. St. Paul, allegedly, the light on the road to Damascus, had epilepsy, and it can cause all kinds of phenomena to occur. I've seen that firsthand. I've got a background in psychology because it's one of the things that I was interested in when I started working as a medium. I wanted to know what was going on inside my own head. And I found different things happened, not just to me, but to many people that I was looking at, strange things they claimed. And you can only doubt so many of them. The stories all seem to be similar. So not everybody lies. And she may have been, some people, as you said, she might have been a simple person in as much as she wouldn't have the power to do what you said she did. But sometimes it can occur for no reason whatsoever because of boredom. She might have been bored. She might have been interested and didn't want to be there, as you said. So that would also help to transport her consciousness. I think it's fascinating anyway, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It is. It's very fascinating. And interestingly enough, the gentleman in the photograph many years later at the cemetery, he, oddly enough, very shortly after that picture was taken, left the company. So I don't know. I don't know if there was some sort of strange little premonition going on of him. Who knows?
There's a lot of jokers in the paranormal. People who don't really believe in it, but they're intent in causing havoc and playing tricks on the people who do believe in it. So you've got to be very vigilant and you've got to be skeptical. Healthy skepticism is good where the paranormal is concerned.
Or with anything in life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
All right, well, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, Deanna's got a very interesting story to tell us about one of her experiences in another cemetery, and this time she actually spoke to a full-body apparition, apparently. So we'll be right back.
Imagine it's the year 2020. With so many podcasts, streams, and interesting stations, you've finally found your paranormal hotspot. We want to personally invite you to join the discussion by tuning in and listening to The Seance Room. With all new and returning guests, intriguing investigative explorations, and scintillating conversations with the beyond. With your hosts, Victor and Linda Salazar.
Hey, Victor here. Are you ready to evoke strange curiosities? Walk through parallel dimensions and delve together into the controversial science of paraphenomena.
Afraid to question the shadow in your room? Footsteps down the hall when no one's home? Bothered you'll become one of those people? Leaving no stone unturned, no topic unanswered. Dim the lights. Turn up the volume. This is Linda. You've reached the threshold of your Parapodcast.
Let's not forget Norma, a.k.a. Mama C.
Hi, I'm Mama C. Grab your favorite cocktail, find your comfy spot, and join me as we engage in some supernatural interactions that will knock your boots off.
Oh, And I'm Rick. I just sit behind all the pretty blinking lights. Be ready. Welcome to the
Haunted airwaves. Conversations with the beyond. Chilling messages from spirits and odd entities. The spirits are going live.
Kalila Smith.
Okay, we are back, and Deanna has a little story she'd like to share with us of something that happened to her quite a few years ago, and it's a little bit different and very, very interesting. So, Deanna, tell us what happened after Katrina.
So we evacuated for Katrina, and we had, like so many families do, a phone list, a phone tree, where everybody calls different people on it to make sure that they've been evacuated and nobody needs any help. And we had certain people on each phone tree that we were to pick up if they needed to be picked up. Somehow, through all that, my grandmother, my dad's mother, did not get picked up. We don't know to this day if she had talked with someone and made other arrangements or whatever, but she did not get picked up. Now, my grandmother lived in New Orleans her whole life. She worked at Charity Hospital as a nurse. As a matter of fact, started as like what they now call candy stripers, I think, way back when she was a teenager, retired from Charity Hospital as a nurse. She was 87 when Katrina hit, so this was an elderly lady. She lived in a subdivision called Lakeview, right outside of the city, and had lived there for many, many years. The one thing that I guess all New Orleanians learn, and probably by the first grade, is 6 little measly words of keep an axe in your attic. Everybody has one. You know it's going to come. You know you're going to flood it sometime. You just don't know when you'll need it, more than if you'll need it. And so every one of us always had an axe in the attic. I say that to preface what happened. We evacuated. We go to my mom's house in Alabama, and we're watching this horrendous thing play out on the news. We're having trouble getting in touch with relatives who had either stayed in or left the city. My grandmother is one of those people. No one can reach her. And my dad starts contacting other people in the family who picked her up. Nobody picked her up. Nobody had her on their list. But my grandmother was one of those people who had lived through many hurricanes and who didn't evacuate, because what evacuation meant for her was their house was going to be looted. It was a waste of time. It was the animals, every reason under the sun. And so it was very possible that she had not gone with anybody, that she was still in the city. But then when you're watching this play out on the news and you're starting to see water roll in that wasn't part of Katrina, so to speak, and levees breaching. And the one thing that they started talking about on the news was a 400-foot breach by a specific canal that I knew was right by my grandmother's house. And we started to get extremely concerned, even more so than the normal concern we were seeing on the television. It took us about 3 weeks to get into her area because Lakeview had been inundated with water up to 20 feet, and they simply could not get us in. So we kept trying, and even after 3 weeks, we were illegally into her property. We went to the property that her house was on. Her house had been literally picked up off of the foundation and moved across the street. It was still standing, but obviously was not going to be standing for long. We were not able to go into the house, but we were able to see things around that, kind of led us to the idea that this was the norm, but nothing that showed a body or anything like that. We still couldn't get in touch with her. One of the policemen was able, or I think firemen actually, was able to get into the attic area, and he said that there were axe marks on the ceiling. Nothing was cut through. But in all honesty, that could have been 40, 50 years old at this point. We didn't know that was from her. And being 87 and about 5'1", the fact of her being able to even get up to the attic and make those axe marks are slim to none at that point. So I still held on to hope that somebody had picked my grandmother up, or that she had gone with a neighbor somewhere. This is not a woman that obviously always had her cell phone on, and at 87 probably didn't know how to use all the activities on the cell phone as it was. So fast forward 3 more weeks, On the 6-week anniversary of Katrina, we went to the Charity Hospital Cemetery, which at that time was still a barbed wire fence in front. There were big gaping holes all through it where dogs had dug up bones over the years. This was a cemetery that belonged to Charity Hospital, where my grandmother was a nurse. Charity Hospital served all of New Orleans, no matter what you made, no matter what your income was, no matter what your insurance was. And over the years, many indigent people, many non-named people had died and had no place to be buried. They had purchased this property outside at the time, outside the city limits, and had mass buried people. As a matter of fact, one mass grave they have record on that there was over 120 people put in one grave. These were not coffins. There were no headstones, nothing like that. Well, my grandmother, having worked at Charity, every Sunday when I was growing up, we would go to our family tombs, and we just in reverence, and every Sunday after we would finish there, my grandmother would take us to that barbed wire fence gate in front of Charity Hospital Cemetery, and she'd look inside and she'd say, the world has forgotten about these people, but they're there. And the stories that I've told you about them. And as long as you keep talking about them, there's a dim light that stays on for those people who have passed over. You keep the memories alive by keeping the conversations going. So we were familiar with Charity Hospital Cemetery because of this. So on the 6-week anniversary of Katrina, we went to our family tomb, and then I took my husband and my 2 grown kids with me over to Charity Hospital Cemetery, and we stood in front of that cemetery quote unquote gate, the barbed wire fence and all that. And I looked inside, and that was when I lost it. That was the very first time that I had just cried and cried and cried. And that was my moment of clarity of, I just knew that my grandmother was gone. And my husband kind of, was hugging me, trying to get me to calm down. And this voice came over and spoke to me and said, excuse me. And we all turned around, my husband, my 2 kids, myself, we all turned around, and there was a man standing there, very white-haired man in a blue denim shirt. And he said, Deanna? And I said, yes. And he said, I knew your grandmother. And that's not uncommon, especially standing in front of Charity Hospital Cemetery or whatever the case may be. I was wiping my tears and saying, okay. And he said, listen closely to me. I know where she is. And so I'm listening, and he's got my attention. And he tells me an address that's basically the line between the Central Business District and the Warehouse District in downtown New Orleans. I knew exactly where the address was, but I didn't know what was at the site. And that's all he says. And he's standing there, and I look around, and I kind of said, okay. And I turn around to my husband and my kids, and I'm like, what do we do? And my husband said, just thank him and we'll go on with the day. We thought this man was crazy. And when we turned around, he was gone. Now, that would not be unusual. He could have easily walked away, except this is 6 weeks post-Katrina. There's no visitors in the city. The only people in the city are those that are trying to get back to their homes and those who are trying to help us get back to our homes. There's no cars. There's nowhere for him to go. These are open cemetery lots. There's nowhere for him to go. And he was gone. And I looked at my husband. We had just come from McDonald's. And I looked at my husband and I said, somebody put something in our drink at McDonald's. And that's all I could think of. And my daughter and my son saw the man. My husband saw the man. He was as 5D as you are. It was not something, you couldn't see through him. You couldn't see anything unusual about this man. This was, as far as we were concerned, a human being. And I told my husband, I said, well, all I know is we're going to that address. We got in my car and we started down toward that address. We got to the address and it was a warehouse. I guess for lack of a better word, a warehouse. There was a big, huge chain around the doors and a padlock. And I knew we weren't going inside. So I called the city. I called 911 and I said to them, this is not necessarily an emergency, but I am missing a loved one from Katrina. I have been given this address. I told them what the address was, and I'm here now. And she put me on hold, and someone else comes back and says, give us 15 minutes and we'll be down there. And at that point in time, I knew something was up because they weren't coming for calls like that. They would have hung up on someone at that point in time with a call like that. 15 minutes approximately goes by and they show up there. And he said, come with me. And he unlocked that padlock and those chains. And I'll just say that 20 minutes later, we had identified the body of my grandmother inside that building. It turned out to be a building where they were holding some of the dead that they had found that they did not have identified. And they had done autopsies on them, but it was before the power and all that was restored. So it was very, very old-fashioned type of autopsies, but she had no identification on her. To this day, 15 years later, we do not know where they found the body, who found the body, or what happened to her, so to speak. We know, we can guess.
Yeah.
Then, of course, it gets even stranger because we've now identified the body, but we want to know who that man was and how did he know where that body was, because they weren't announcing that warehouse was a place to go for bodies. What they were doing was they were slowly taking those bodies to a refrigeration truck on what we call the West Bank. And once the bodies were there, people could come there to try to identify their loved ones. They started at this warehouse, but no one in the city had given any information about this warehouse to that point. So this was not somewhere they wanted people coming, obviously. The city got involved because now they wanted to know how the heck I knew about that address. And we go from there.
Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after-death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith.
From that point forward, we were able to make arrangements for my grandmother's funeral and things like that. And we were able to put my grandmother in our family too. Now, it didn't bring her back, but I'm now considering this man, this white-haired man in this blue denim shirt, a guardian angel, because he's not brought her back to life, but he's given us closure. And, we start hearing stories like another family has shown up at that same warehouse. There again, I was talking about this story a little bit to people that I cared about, family members and things. So there was a possibility that somebody was giving out that address. And, but in all, there were 5 other families besides myself who were led to that address and who stated one thing that I never did repeat, which was, it was a white-haired man in a blue denim shirt that gave them that address. And so at the end of it, there were 6 families that were able to identify a loved one and put closure to their situation. But it left 80-something people that were still unidentified. So he certainly was not giving the address for all of these people. They still are unidentified to this day. So 3 years later, we are able to, we've accumulated this land in the back of Charity Hospital Cemetery, and we're able to build a Katrina memorial, and we're able to build these crypts where they then 3 years later, after Katrina, give these people a jazz funeral and send them off in the honor that they should have been honored to begin with, and put these unidentified bodies in these crypts. At that funeral that day, I met some of the other families who had been the ones that this man had contacted. And they all said, we don't know who he was. He just appeared and then he disappeared. So the city's involved, and they invite us down to the mayor's office at the time to talk to the city about the description of this man and see if we can identify him and put some reasoning behind this, because the city's not going to believe that it's a paranormal experience. They want fact, and they want to know who this person is who may have the answers for other things that took place at Katrina. He obviously knows something. So the 6 families go down there, and we are able to talk to a sketch artist. They do SketchUp drawings, separate rooms. The description, the sketch of the man is almost identical in each one of the drawings. The mayor looks at the drawings and says, I think I know who this man is. And he goes out in the hallway of City Hall. He's gone about 10 minutes. He comes back. He's got an 8x10 picture that's obviously been hanging somewhere in City Hall. And in that picture is a bunch of men in blue denim shirts. And he said, can you point to the man that you met? And we all pointed to the exact same man in the picture. And he said, that's what I thought. He said, I know that man. That is Mr. Sims. And he said, Mr. Sims worked for the city of New Orleans. He, I don't remember, he did some kind of maintenance for the city of New Orleans. He also worked maintenance for Charity Hospital. He said, the only problem is Mr. Sims died in 1974. And of course, we all went, oh, okay. And, and even the mayor was kind of like, I don't know what to do with this information. So we started looking into that. And there is a tombstone for Mr. Sims in the cemetery right next door to Charity Hospital Cemetery. When Katrina hit, it was his tombstone that ended up in Charity Hospital Cemetery, the only tombstone that had a name left on it they could read. The others had to be redone from scratch. His, actually, you could read the description on it, the name, the dates, and it ended up right there in that cemetery where I was, right next to where he originally was. But the best part, and the most interesting part to me, was about 4 years ago, a woman contacted me by phone and asked me if I could meet her. I said, I'm not meeting you without knowing you. And she told me that she was Mr. Sims' granddaughter and that she had something for me. And I said, no more questions, I'll meet you. And we did meet right in front of the gates of Charity Hospital Cemetery, which is now the Katrina Memorial. I felt that that was appropriate to meet this woman because I didn't know, I thought she was just going to tell me things about her grandfather. Instead, she gave me a picture, and the picture was taken literally of her grandfather, Mr. Sims, on his deathbed at Charity Hospital where he died. Now, he wasn't dead in the picture, but he was within a few hours of passing. And there is a nurse sitting at his bedside holding his hand, and that nurse is my grandmother.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about, the Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spookhouse. This is real.
She said that my grandmother was with him, or that nurse was with him when he passed. So in my mind, my grandmother helped him cross over, and in my mind, he helped put closure to my grandmother crossing over. I don't know that that's fact, but that's my comfort in this. And before that, I would never have given a haunted tour or anything like that. I was doing history stuff 100% of the time. And after that, my mind changed. That's when I changed my mind to, wait a minute, there is way more than just a ghostly encounter or something like that, or some thought process that you think is someone else's feelings or whatever. There was something manifested here that was helping people. And Julia Roberts has spoken on television about having seen this man. She didn't name him, but this man in the cemetery, Reznor, the lead singer of a rock band that used to live in spoke. Yeah, Trent Reznor. He spoke of a white-haired man in a blue denim shirt that spoke to him at the Katrina Memorial as he sat there meditating for the people that had passed. So whether or not their experiences are real, I don't know. I know what mine was, and I know that there are 6 families that have a very good memory of a white-haired man with a blue denim shirt that appears in those pictures at City Hall and that was sitting with my grandmother as he passed away.
That's amazing. Really amazing.
Yes.
I mean, I could feel it as you were feel how we're coming over. I think you were quite. It was an honourable thing, really. You to experience it. I also think that you're mediumistically inclined. Sometimes people go through these experiences, and it precipitates something in them. And I think that you have an ability that you could develop, had you want to,
right,
mediumistically, which would change your life completely. What's your date of birth?
October 23rd.
So you're a Scorpio.
I was born literally on the cusp of Scorpio and Libra, but I'm all Scorpio.
Numerically, you're influenced by the sign of Taurus.
Yes.
Nothing to do with astrology. It means that every May, around May, you enter a new cycle. What's your husband's date of birth?
June 7th.
June the 7th. So he's a Gemini.
Yes.
Geminis are ditherers, you know. They can't make quick decisions normally.
Yes.
You wear the trousers. You're the strongest one. But traditionally, water signs are mediumistic. They have a sensitivity about them. And the story you've just related to us is one that I've written about, not that particular one, but I've experienced it myself and also with other people. I don't know if I have time to do it, Kalila, for me to say,
yes.
Kalila, can I just say?
Absolutely, yes. Whatever. We're rolling. We have time for whatever you want.
This is a true story. It concerned a lady who'd lost her mother, and she used to go to the cemetery every weekend with her little boy to lay flowers. And in this particular cemetery, it was Holy Trinity that I know quite well. The tap, the water, what do you call them? That give you
Faucet.
water. Faucet. The kid used to go and get the water for his mother and bring it back. But this time, it was a long time. And she got worried. And just as she was about to go and look for him, he came. This is a kid of around the age of 9 years old. And he was clutching something. And the story is a bit complicated here because mother's the only one in the grave. And she said to the boy, what are you clutching? And he opened his hand, and it was a wedding ring. And she looked at it, and she said, where did you get this from? She thought he'd found it. He said, a lady gave it to me. And when she looked at it, it was inscribed inside with her mother's name.
Oh.
Now, this ring had been left on her mother's body, and she wanted it, but the eldest sister wouldn't allow it. She wanted it to be buried with her mother. But of course, and she said to her son, well, can you describe what did she look like? And he described this woman, but not as she was when she passed over, because she was quite elderly, but as she was when she was in her prime, when she was quite young. And it was her mother's ring. Now, the only way that could have been verified is to exhume the body, which was never done. And the lady related the story to me. And only because I'd heard so many different stories, the correlation between all these stories is too strong to be dismissed. So your story is incredible. I'd like to use it in a book, if that's okay.
Feel free.
Are you on Facebook?
I am.
She's one of my friends.
Is she?
Yes. I will send you her page, and you two definitely. And actually, Billy and I are talking about doing some workshops in mediumship training. And
I wonder if in mediumship, because Kalila, that it goes a little bit deeper with me than when just mediumship. I just recently had a incident happen where I was just walking down a street in our French Quarter here, and I passed a specific business not associated with our business, and I heard some words in my head, and I contacted one of our workers and told them what I had heard, and that worker told Kalila what I'd heard, and that panned out later. I don't want to say what it was because it involves a coworker, but things like that. When after Katrina, and we were in Alabama to stay for 7 years, and during that 7 years, Alabama being the Bible Belt of the area, the things that I would do when I would look at somebody, and it was always tapped up to psychology, because I was a psychologist too, but when I would look at somebody and say, don't think that way, and they'd be like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I was labeled a witch, because that's what they do in Alabama. But I got back down to New Orleans as fast as possible. But here it's, you're much easier. You're able to kind of think this way and not be labeled names or whatever. And of course, with my line of work, I'm able to do it. I'm wondering if the medium part of what I call being sensitive is actually the same thing, or if maybe, I guess there's different degrees of that, right?
Yeah, there are degrees.
She's clairaudient, really. She's
clairaudient, yes.
She's been...
And clairsentience, which is something else. But also, everything happens for a reason.
Right.
I mean, knowing Kalila, the way you've been brought into Kalila's life as well, the way you work with her, and this little episode concerning your grandmother, all these different things. Other things will happen to make you aware. Sometimes people, if they lose somebody very close to them, it either moves them away from religion and God, or it'll bring them closer to it. With you, it's just opened your consciousness in more ways. You're sensitive. You see, normally, Scorpios are the hardest people in the astrological world because they're very volatile usually and quite unpredictable. But they make good mediums. You're a Gemini, aren't you, Kalila?
I am. That's why I was laughing when you were talking about Geminis. I'm June 21st. I am on the cusp of Gemini and Cancer, but I also have Gemini rising. So,
well, numerically, you're influenced by the sign of Pisces. Now, it's nothing to do with astrology, as I explained to Diana, but it means that every March you enter a new cycle. And sometimes this cycle can be problematic, but mostly pleasant things will occur. And it's also a time to initiate all the changes that you're trying to initiate. But also, Geminis are very talkative. They make good communicators. So they're good mediums. They like to talk, and they're quite explicit. Now, the thing about Scorpios, Diana's sign, they can be very... they're very meticulous. They make good teachers, so as Geminis do. So they're very analytical. They analyze things too closely, and often suffer with addictions. They might have addiction, whether it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I'm talking about myself here.
Or work.
Or
work.
They put their heart and soul into it. Now, I need to relate another story. As you know, I lived in Paris, and I was in a band, and I had a drug problem. And I came back to the UK in 1970 for treatment, and it coincided with my father passing away. He had pancreatic cancer. To cut a long story short, I'd lost everything. So I decided I couldn't take anymore. And there used to be a Catholic church that I used to go and sit in. I was born in Liverpool, the home of the Beatles. And this church was always open. It was nice. And I used to pick the place by St. Teresa. I always had an affinity with Teresa. Anyway, I sat in the church this day. I've been numerous times. And I decided I'd sent letters to certain people telling them I couldn't take any more and why. And as I was sitting there, by St. Teresa, I heard a voice, and it was an Irish voice. It was a deep, resonant voice. It was a man. And when I looked up, it was a priest. And he was tall. He had silver hair. And he said, "Can I help you, my son?" I said, "I don't think so." So he told me to move along the bench, and he sat down beside me. And anyway, I told him the whole story of what I've been through, and I was always in competition with things. I had a brother who I didn't get on with, and all these different things. I brought heartache to my mum and dad before he passed over. And there were 3 steps up to this church. And he pulled himself tightly to his feet, and he said to me, "Well, I think your plight ended with the steps up to the church." And I didn't know what he meant. So I sat down again and I cried, and I didn't hear his footsteps go, but there was a heavy door out of the church and into the church. And when I turned, nobody had left. So I just thought he'd gone somewhere else in the church. So some weeks later, I pulled myself together, started to look at life in a different way. I didn't know whether it was him or what it was. I decided to pay the priest a visit in his house next door to the church. And as I walked up the pathway, there was a lady polishing the brass knocker. And she said, "Can I help you, young man?" Because I was young then. And I told her the story. And she said, "Oh," I said, "Can I speak to the priest?" And this young priest came out. I said, "No, not him." And I related the story fully. And she went away, disappeared. And he got fed up with me, and he disappeared too. The lady emerged with a photograph in a frame. She said, "Is this the man?" Because I described him. And I said, "Yeah, that's him." She said, and she said who he was. She said, "But unfortunately, he died over 20 years ago."
Oh my goodness.
And I went cold. And she said, "Don't worry about it." She said, "Because this isn't the first time this has happened. It's happened to other people who have been in the church." And that straightened me. That just floored me and brought me back down to earth. Wow. So when I hear stories like Diana's story, I don't doubt it at all, because it does happen. And angels do exist, and they don't always have wings.
Right.
Good.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing to me. I wonder if there is a common denominator of the reason that some of these people do come just to help, like the priest with you,
Yeah.
Mr. Sims with me. If it's, is it like going back to the movie Ghost and it's unfinished business, or is it something that they were meant to do, that they were sent back for? Are they still here? I mean, what is your take on that?
I think people with a good heart in this life, when they pass over, they've got to do something with this goodness, and they choose to help people who are less fortunate than themselves. And because they have a clearer vision of life in general, they home in on certain people. And if your cry is loud enough and your needs are great, then these people will always come down to you and help you. It happens all the time. And I've seen lots of people who you wonder what they're living for, but they've always been helped by, they refer to them as guardian angels. Angels do exist.
Right.
I've got a book called The Angel's Book of Promises, which I started as a kid. And it was basically because when I used to ask the angels for something to help me, I thought one day, and I'm talking about a 9-year-old kid, I thought, well, they're giving me things, but I need to pay something back. So every time I asked for something, I'd write it down on one page. And on the other page, I'd say what I would do in return. It could be a good boy for mummy, or eat all my greens or something. And it was a method I used right through my childhood. And it worked for me. So I thought it might work for other people. But celestial beings do exist. And sometimes they come with 4 legs and a tail that wags.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so anyway.
Oh, I do too. Yes, absolutely.
Well, you should do.
I have enough, right?
And people who don't like animals, generally speaking, don't like people.
That's right.
And also, there's a lot of research done. Kids who are brought up in a non-pet environment are usually more aggressive, unstable emotionally when they get older. People brought up with an animal of some kind are unusual when they get older, because they have a sensitivity about them. And I found that to be true as well.
Right. Wow.
Animals play an important part in the development of our consciousness. We've got 2 cats. Kalila's got everything but an elephant.
I only have dogs and cats.
And it's early days for that one, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I agree with you 100% about the animals. 100%. I always said, when my kids were dating, if you find somebody that doesn't like animals, do not date them. Just stay away from them.
Yes, I mean,
That's
I would
true.
say you tend to. I believe in the attraction, group attraction of souls. You don't have to be in love with your soulmate, but usually groups are attracted together for a particular reason. And I think that your position in all this is for a particular reason, preparing you for something. And I think that you're with the right person, Kalila. She'll help you in more ways.
Absolutely. But, and you had another situation, Deanna, while we're telling stories, we're telling such fabulous stories. She had a situation where, I think a couple of times, where you actually heard Stephanie talking to you.
Yes.
And one in particular is, where were you when you had the butterfly situation? You had the butterfly situation. Billy, ever since Stephanie died, one of the signs that she started sending me was butterflies. And I saw butterflies in such, I could be going 70 miles an hour down the interstate and there would be a butterfly going alongside of me, or out of nowhere, a butterfly would come and tap my windshield. I saw butterflies in situations where one would not see a butterfly. And very early on after Stephanie passed, she appeared to me, and it was interesting. She appeared in a dream, and she appeared with my mother. And I guess maybe she was still working on trying to communicate, because it was almost like a shower curtain. Like, you get those almost opaque kind of shower curtains, and you can't see through them. And my mother appeared, and it was interesting because my mother didn't have any impairments, but her mother and some of her brothers were deaf. So my mother knew sign language. So as a kid, like if my mother was on the phone or something, she would communicate with sign language while she's on the phone. So I would get used to her facial expressions. She could yell at me in sign language, and I knew, that she's yelling at me in sign language. And it was very funny because I had just started developing my mediumship on my path of delving deeper into it. And I was still struggling with trying to communicate with Stephanie myself. And my mother appeared. She had Stephanie with her. And my mother's hands came out of this partition of sorts. And she told me in sign language, and in the dream I understood it completely, you keep going, girl. You keep going. And I said, I just need to know, if I'm reaching Stephanie. And when Stephanie was a very small child, they didn't know if she'd talk at all. She started preschool at 2 in special ed, and they didn't know that if she would ever speak. So she too learned sign language very early. And in this dream, when I said, I really need to know that Stephanie's communicating with me somehow, I need to know that I'm reaching her, Stephanie's hands came through and they were shaking. It was almost like she was having a hard time making this connection, but her hands came through and she did this. Yeah. And this was what she would do when she was a very small tot. When she was a very small little toddler, she would do that when she saw a butterfly. And she was letting me know that she was sending me the butterflies. So Deanna, tell him what happened many years later.
I was in Arizona, and this was this past October, and we were just looking for a place to eat lunch, and I was on a diet. So I usually go on and check out menus and where I can eat. And instead we passed this restaurant, and it was the Mariposa Cafe, and it was very fancy looking. And I thought, I don't know anything about, it said on the sign what type of cuisine they had, and I didn't know anything about that particular cuisine. And, I just didn't know if it was going to be the right place. But I did a U-turn and went back and went into this place. I said, we're eating here. Didn't know anything about it. We get inside, and they've got butterflies on the sign and butterflies on the light posts and real butterflies inside and in all these little different displays and all this stuff. And I took pictures of it, going to show it to Kalila, knowing that, Stephanie loves butterflies. But while we were there, I heard Stephanie say, or what I didn't realize it was Stephanie at the time. I think I just heard a voice say, you need this particular butterfly. Now, this thing was not for sale. It was on the wall. It was just a display. And I just could not get it off my mind. And so I asked to see a manager, and the manager came out, and I said, are these for sale? And he said, no, this is just our display. And I said, I really need that particular butterfly. I need to take that particular butterfly with me for someone else. He said, well, I can't do anything about it. It's not for sale. So I start crying. This was not an acting job. I had no idea where these emotions were coming from. And I said, you don't understand. This woman's daughter died. Her daughter wants her to have this butterfly. And at that moment, as those words came out of my mouth, I'm thinking, I have lost my mind, because I didn't think about it being Stephanie telling me to get that butterfly. So what I didn't know at the time was that Mariposa meant butterfly. And I didn't know that Stephanie's color, or favorite color of butterfly, I guess, Kalila, is that right? Or whatever, is the dark blue, or?
It's the blue morpho butterfly. Yes. And Stephanie, the reason why that butterfly became very symbolic of Stephanie was that I spent a lot of time in the rainforest in Costa Rica, and it is their national butterfly, is the blue morpho. And when I would go to the rainforest, I would see these blue morphos that were this big. And after Stephanie passed, I had one in the rainforest follow me into a gift shop, and it was just flying all over me. And people were just amazed that there's literally a blue morpho butterfly was following me home from the rainforest. And Stephanie's favorite color was blue. But nonetheless, after she passed, I had a tattoo put on my back right up here, and it's her name, and it is a tattoo of a blue morpho butterfly. And nobody ever knows this because you don't see it. It's right underneath here. It's right underneath, in between my shoulder blades. No one would know it's there. So that was the
manager calls the owner of the restaurant and gets the owner on the phone, and probably is saying something about, we have a psychotic customer that is not leaving without this butterfly that's on the wall. And so they agreed to sell it to me. And so I brought it back to Kalila and gave it to her. And when I gave it to her, she said, you're not going to believe this. And she sends me a picture of the back of her back with the tattoo. And she said, Mariposa means butterfly and all this stuff. And I'm going, oh my gosh. And she said, that was Stephanie. There's no doubt that was Stephanie that was talking to you. Then we had, months later, we had a meeting at one of Kalila's friends' houses. And we did for Stephanie's birthday. We had a Stephanie's birthday party. And when Stephanie showed up at the birthday party to have a piece of cake, she called me the butterfly lady. So it kind of made, kind of
confirmation. She came through the girl in my mediumship circle who does direct voice, and called her the butterfly lady. And it's not the first time that someone has gotten that kind of a message from her. So it was a confirmation, because many years before, I had done a reading for someone who has since become a very close friend of mine, but I did a reading for a lady who lived about an hour away. I was going to go do a show, and I did a private reading for her. And when she came into the hotel room to get her private reading, she had something wrapped up, and she said, I have a gift for you. And I said, well, that wasn't necessary. She said, no, you have to take this. And I said, really? I said, I don't feel right taking a gift from a stranger. She says, no. She said, I had this for 20 years and I lost it. And I was cleaning out drawers and I found it. And when I found it, she said, a sweet little voice said, give it to her. She would like it. And it was a blue butterfly in jewels on a hair clip, a big hair clip that clips into your hair. And the lady gave it to me, and her name is Mary, and she's a nurse, and we have become very close friends ever since then. And she said, I'm not a medium. She says, and I said, this is the first time somebody's given me a reading when they come for a reading. And she says, I'm not a medium. I don't know. She says, but I heard a very sweet little voice, a little girl say, give it to her. You have to give it to her. And she says, I knew it was for you.
Yeah, nice story.
Yes. So we are just about out of time now. And
oh, well.
Yes. Actually, we got a few more minutes. So if anybody has a story that they want to share, please get in touch with us. We do have a group on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. Afterlife Radio Podcast is the page, and we have an Afterlife Radio private group that you can request to be a part of, and you can send us questions, you can send us pictures, you can even send us your stories. You can get in touch with us directly through instant message if you want, and send us stories, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person we invite onto the show. But this has been a wonderful time. This is a very special edition of Afterlife Radio and video podcast in honor of All Saints Day. So thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful night, and just keep believing.